The prayer leader replied to him, saying, I passed by all their places, and by your place as well. For I was passing by a certain place, and I got the king's crown standing there, and I understood that the king is certainly here. However, I was unable to seek and find him. So I went further and passed by a sea of blood. And I understood that this sea is certainly made from the tears of the queen who weeps over all this. And the queen is certainly here. However, I could not seek and find her. And so I passed by a sea of milk. And I understood that the sea is certainly made from the milk of the queen's daughter, whose son was lost. And the milk pressured her. And from this came the sea of milk. And from the queen's daughter is certainly here. And the queen's daughter is certainly here. However, I was unable to seek and find her. And so I went further and saw the golden hairs of the child laid out. And I did not take from them whatsoever. And I knew that the child is certainly here. However, it was not possible to seek and find him. And so I went further, passing by an ocean of wine. And I knew that this ocean is certainly made from the speech of the orator, who stands and speaks consolations before the king and the queen, and then turns his face and delivers consolations to the queen's daughter. And from these words came about the ocean of wine. As it is written in the Song of Solomon 7:10, your palate is like good wine. However, I could not find him. And so I went further, and I saw standing there a stone, which had etchings in it, just like the hand with its ruts, just like the hand with all the furrows which had been at the king's, as mentioned. And I understood that the sage of the king is certainly here. And the sage had engraved for himself the depiction of the hand on the stone, but it was not possible to find him. And so I went further, and I saw arranged on a mountain the golden tables, the credenzas, display cupboards, and the rest of the king's treasures. And I understood that the king's treasurer, he who sits over all the treasures, is certainly here. However, it was impossible to find him. All this the prayer leader told over to the warrior. The warrior replied, I too passed by all these places, and I did take from the golden hair of the child, for I took 7 hairs that had all sorts of colors, and they are very dear to me. And I settled down and sustained myself with whatever possible, with grass and so forth, until I had nothing whatsoever to sustain myself. I let myself roam about, and when I went away from my place, I forgot my bow there. The prayer leader replied, I saw your bow, and I knew that it was certainly your bow, but I could not find you. The warrior went on telling the prayer leader that when I went away from that place, I went until I encountered the company mentioned above, the rest of the ample-limbed warriors mentioned above, and I entered in their midst because I was very hungry and wanted to eat. And as soon as I entered among them, they immediately took me up as a king, as mentioned. And now I go conquering the world. And my intention is perhaps I will be able to find the king and his people mentioned above. The prayer leader began to discuss with the warrior what to do with these people. that is, with the country that is so fallen into the lust of money, to the extent that they came up with such crazy foolishness that those who have a lot of money are gods for them, and so the other follies the country had. The warrior answered the prayer leader that he had heard from the king, and from all the cravings a person has fallen into, he can be extracted, except for someone who has fallen in the lust for money. It is impossible to extract him from it by any means. Therefore you will have no effect on them whatsoever, for it is impossible to extract them from this at all, albeit through the way that there is to the sword mentioned above, and from where he gets his powers mentioned. Only through this way can one extract from the lust of money someone who has sunk into it. So he heard from the king. The warrior remained together with the prayer leader for a while, and as for the country which beseeched the prayer leader that he should go out to the warrior on their behalf, as mentioned, they extended the time, that is, the prayer leader convinced the warrior that he should give them a time, during which time he should do nothing at all to them. He allotted them time. Afterwards, they made signs between themselves, that is, the prayer leader and the warrior exchanged signs, so that one would be able to know from one another. And then the prayer leader went off on his way. As the prayer leader went on, he saw people going along and entreating Hashem Yisbarach, praying and carrying prayer books. He was afraid of them, and they were frightened of him too. He stood to pray, and they also stood to pray. Then he asked them, "Who are you?" They answered him, "Inasmuch as, when there was the storm wind, the world separated into many factions, these choosing the thing, and those choosing that thing. These choosing this thing, and those choosing that thing," just as all the different factions as explained above. At that time we chose for ourselves that the main purpose is to be constantly involved in prayer to Hashem Yisbarach. We sought and found a master of prayer, a Baal Tefillah, and made him a king. When the prayer leader heard this, it exceptionally pleased him, for this is what he himself wanted. He began to converse with them, and he showed them the order of his prayers, and his books, and his ideas he had regarding prayers. And when they heard his talk, their eyes opened, and they saw the greatness of the prayer leader. They immediately made him a king over them. For their king deferred the kingship to him, since they saw that he is quite a great man, that he is set apart on a very, very high level. The prayer leader taught them how to pray to Hashem Yisbarach, and he made them into very great, complete tzaddikim. For they had been tzaddikim before as well, since they had involved themselves only in prayer, but the prayer leader opened their eyes until they became extremely great tzaddikim. The prayer leader sent a letter to the warrior and informed him how he was privileged and had found such people as he desires and had become king over them.